What's up, Taiwan? I'm Ethan Liu with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan has banned student exchange programs with 3 Chinese schools after the education minister said they were being controlled by an intelligence gathering department set up by Beijing. Reese Ayers has more.
Taiwan's education ministry has blacklisted 3 Chinese schools over alleged ties to Beijing's United Front, essentially banning student exchange programs with Taiwan. The 3 institutions in question are Huaqiao and Jinan universities and the Beijing Chinese Language and Culture College. There are over 2,000 Taiwanese students currently enrolled in those schools, and among their alma mater, some Taiwanese lawmakers. Education Minister Zheng Ying-yao said those particular schools are under the control of the United Front Work Department. That's a body set up by China's Communist Party to gather intelligence on and attempt to influence so-called elite individuals from outside China, including from Taiwan. Minister Zheng said the measure is necessary to prevent China from systematically targeting or recruiting Taiwanese students, and that education providers have an obligation to protect national security, adding that degrees from those universities will no longer be recognised, though previously obtained qualifications will be unaffected. As for the more than 2,000 students currently enrolled at those schools, the Mainland Affairs Council, which handles relations with China, had this to say.
我想教育部他对于这些还在学的学生他的权益，我想他会采取教育部会有其他的方法我觉得这些学生的就学权益基本上基本上是必须要保障必须要保障，但是具体的这个政策到底是什么那有待教育部来做决定。
The president of Taiwan's own Jinan University has already said they'll comply with the ban. Institutions found defying the ban will lose government subsidies, but individual students will still be able to apply to the schools independently, though they may not want to if those degrees will no longer be recognized in Taiwan. China and Taiwan have already put limits on diplomats and tourists traveling between both countries, and this is yet another restriction on exchanges across the strait, further straining already tense relations. Fu Hong and Reese Ayers for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te says his country won't be intimidated by China. He was speaking at the Halifax International Security Forum in the capital Taipei, the first time it's being held outside of North America. Rick Lauer reports.
Taiwan is welcoming government and military officials from around the world here to the capital Taipei as it hosts one of the world's largest defence summits, the Halifax International Security Forum, here in Asia for the first time. On the agenda are some of the most pressing security issues of this age, from ending Russia's war on Ukraine to countering China's influence here in the Indo-Pacific. To open the 2-day summit, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te saying that his country is determined to stand up to authoritarianism.
Taiwan holds a key position on the fourth island chain, directly facing an authoritarian threat. But we will not be intimidated. We will stand firm and safeguard our national sovereignty, maintain our free and democratic way of life.
From disinformation's pivotal role in modern warfare to cutting out high technology from your adversary's weapon supply chains, defence leaders here are weighing in on issues affecting security here in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. Taiwan, so often denied a voice on the world stage due to pressure from China, it's a unique opportunity to engage with like-minded partners and show solidarity in an increasingly polarised world. Joseph Wu and Rick Lauer in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
There's more strain on the relationship between Washington and Kyiv after U.S. President Donald Trump launched an attack on his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It comes as Ukraine peace talks ramp up between Russia and the U.S. Rosie Gweninger reports.
As the US advances talks with Russia to end the war in Ukraine without Kyiv's involvement, it sparked a row between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. On his social media platform, Trump accused the Ukrainian leader of being a dictator and took aim at his approval ratings. Trump made the same claims while speaking in Florida.
He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break.
Ukrainian law prohibits elections during periods of martial law, which the country has been under since Russia began its invasion nearly 3 years ago. Zelenskyy hit back at Trump's claims, saying the US leader is living in a disinformation space and accused him of spreading Russian propaganda.
І надійним миром. І так, щоб Росія не змогла прийти в Україну ще раз, і щоб повернулись українці з російського полону, і щоб в Україні було майбутнє. Це нормальне бажання кожної нації. Багато зустрічей, нарад сьогодні, командування армії, розвідка, міністри для підготовки до перемовин з представником.
That after Trump also wrongfully claimed Ukraine started the war, when it was Russia that launched a full-scale invasion in 2022 after years of aggression. The almost 3-year war has claimed the lives of 12,000 Ukrainian civilians and tens of thousands of soldiers, leaving many Ukrainians feeling betrayed by Trump's comments.
Вибори під час війни, вони взагалі неможливі. Тому що багато людей повиїжджало. Це взагалі не актуальне питання. Витрачати кошти зараз під час війни на вибори.
Я вважаю, що це невірна політика і невірне звинувачення України. Звинувачують жертву, і він стає на бік ворога.
The US president has repeatedly praised his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, calling him a savvy and strong leader. The two heads of state are expected to meet soon after US and Russian officials kicked off what they say were successful peace negotiations in Saudi Arabia early this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his country won't accept any deal made without Kyiv's involvement, while Putin welcomes the rekindling of relations with the US.
Да, и самое главное здесь в решении всех очень острых вопросов, включая и украинское урегулирование, заключается в том, что без повышения уровня доверия между Россией и Соединенными Штатами решить многие вопросы, в том числе и украинский кризис, невозможно.
Trump's move closer to Russia is a complete backflip of the previous Biden administration's stance. They refused to speak to Moscow since the outbreak of war and also became Ukraine's biggest financial backer. But policy analysts say Trump's new direction might not indicate a major change in US policy.
There's a cost to Trump and his desire to end the war quickly in that agenda. Because, as he said rightly, 2 or 3 days into his second presidency, Putin's the obstacle. And if Putin is the obstacle, which he is, Trump needs to make clear it is his highest priority by giving the proper disincentives for Putin to continue the war.
But as the US leader threatens to cut funding to Ukraine, it has spurred some action by Kiev's European neighbours. After a summit in Paris earlier this week, EU leaders reiterated their support for Ukraine, moving to rapidly increase defence spending.
Några konkreta saker som togs upp och där vi tydligt står enade. Det första är fred genom styrka. Det låter bättre på engelska. Peace through strength. Att det är bara ett Ukraina som rustas för att kunna klara av att i en stark position förhandla om fred. Det är bara så vi kan trygga freden i vår del av världen.
And diplomats are continuing to work towards bringing an end to the conflict. A US envoy is in Kyiv to discuss American support for Ukraine. And the British Prime Minister and French President are expected to visit Washington to discuss the war with Donald Trump. Increasingly important talks as the relationship between the US, Europe and Ukraine fracture. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Hamas has returned the bodies of 4 Israelis taken hostage during the militant group's 2023 attack on Israel. The 4 hostages include a mother and her 2 young children. Hamas says they were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. It's part of an ongoing hostage and prisoner exchange between Israel and Hamas during the 6-week ceasefire. Hamas has agreed to return 25 Israeli hostages and 8 bodies, while Israel will release 1,500 Palestinian prisoners. Australia and Papua New Guinea plan to upgrade their security cooperation agreement to a full defense pact.
We live in a world which is increasingly strategically complex. This is a moment where it is really important that we are working with our closest of friends, but in this case, we are working with family, and that is very much how we see our relationship with Papua New Guinea.
The aim is to make the militaries of both countries more closely integrated. It's one of several agreements Australia has already signed or plans to sign with Papua New Guinea in response to China's spreading influence in the region. The criminal trial of impeached South Korean President Yoon has begun in Seoul. The ousted leader is facing insurrection charges for his failed declaration of martial law in early December. Yoon and his legal team have defended the decision, saying it was to protect the country and its constitutional order. He has been behind bars since his arrest in January. Yoon is the first South Korean president to go on trial for criminal charges. Huge protests in Indonesia as thousands take to the streets, calling out funding cuts that critics say will hinder access to key sectors and welfare services. They're demanding the government reevaluate its new austerity measures. Gina Lopez reports.
Thousands of university students take to the streets across Indonesia, decrying the budget efficiency policies of the country's president, Prabowo Subianto, the 72-year-old former general who assumed the elected office just 5 months ago.
This policy has significantly impacted the livelihoods of civil society and also key human rights and law enforcement institutions.
Prabowo's budget efficiency policy aims to cut funding to various government institutions in the name of mitigating what it sees as wasteful government spending. Among the impacted sectors are education, health, and natural disaster prevention. Opponents argue that it will cut funding for scholarships, lay off government contractual workers, and discontinue key welfare programs for the poor. The budget cuts were justified as a way to fund a free meal program, the hallmark of Prabowo's presidential campaign. The program aims to combat malnutrition by providing daily nutritious meals to children and pregnant women. But critics call it wasteful and inefficient, pointing out its exorbitant budget and the simultaneous cuts to primary and secondary education. Analysts warn the cuts will have sweeping effects across society.
Budget cuts are also applied to different ministries and agencies. There could be a massive layoff in the future, which means that some parents would actually lose their jobs, while at the same time their children lose their scholarship.
During his presidential campaign, Prabowo distanced himself from his involvement in the country's dictatorial past and promised to usher in a golden era. Instead, public opposition to his policies has twisted that slogan in protest, with the hashtag #DarkIndonesia trending on social media. The movement eventually took to the streets, with student councils across the nation putting forward a list of demands, including that the government reassess budget slashes, the free meal program, and other large-scale projects. They also want the government to properly compensate teachers and implement pro-people policies by listening to input and criticism from the public. In response to protests, Indonesia's Secretary of State insisted that the budget cuts will not affect the education sector. But the demonstrators are still awaiting an official response from government, vowing to continue protesting for the rest of the week. Hank Chu and Gina Lopez for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website and follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out this Viking longship named Stormbird. It was built by a team composed mainly of military veterans in the UK. I'm Ethan Liu. Take care, and I'll see you next time.